Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're gonna dive deep into budgeting made easy.
Oh, yeah. I've heard good things about this one.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like the ultimate guide to like simplifying your finances and, finally ditching that debt for good.
It's funny, everyone wants to get out of debt, but who actually wants to budget?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But this guide actually promises to make it like painless, even kind of fun.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Me too.
Hmm.
Plus, they've got all these like real life stories woven in, to show you how these budgeting techniques actually play out.
Ooh, like cautionary tales.
Exactly. Like
Right.
there's this one about Alicia who moves to Florida, chasing that sunshine dream, but it ends up turning into a financial nightmare.
Oof, I can relate to that. I think we've all had those moments where, like, our finances take an unexpected hit.
Totally. And they've also got these two contrasting budget makeovers, Carrie's bad budget versus Nathan's good budget.
Ooh, a budgeting showdown. I'm ready to judge.
Me too. It'll be interesting to see like what they did right and what totally backfired.
You know what really stands out to me about this guide is how it digs into the why behind people's financial wins and fails.
Yeah, it's not just about like the mechanics of budgeting, but like the psychology behind it too.
Right. Like with Alicia's move to Florida, it goes beyond just saying moving is expensive. It
Oh,
explores, like, did she underestimate the cost of living? Or were her job expectations unrealistic?
right. It's those little details that can really trip you up.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. It's about recognizing those patterns and being like, oh, I've totally done that, or I need to watch out for that.
Totally. It's all about learning from other people's mistakes so we don't have to make them ourselves, right?
Exactly. And speaking of learning, have you ever experienced like a sudden income change, maybe a job shift or like unexpected
Oh,
expenses?
yeah, for sure. I think everyone has at some point, right?
Probably. And this guide stresses the importance of building a flexible budget that can adapt to those curveballs life throws at you.
Makes sense. A rigid budget probably wouldn't survive a cross-country move or even just like a surprise car repair.
Right. And that's why the first step in this guide is all about income analysis.
So, like figuring out where your money's actually coming from.
Yep. Seems simple enough, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have a clear grasp on that.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing your salary, but like actually tracking your income, right?
Exactly. The guide even has this income worksheet that encourages you to compare your expected income to your actual income.
Ah, so it's about seeing if there's a gap between what you think you'll make and what actually hits your bank account.
Exactly. And that gap, it can tell you a lot about your financial stability.
Hmm. So if that gap is like consistently huge, that's a red flag, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It might mean you need to adjust your expectations or find ways to bridge that gap.
Okay, so like maybe picking up a side hustle or finding ways to cut back on spending.
Exactly. And speaking of spending, that brings us to step two, the expense breakdown.
This is where we get down to the nitty gritty, or like figuring out where all our money's going.
Yeah. And the guide breaks it down into three categories: fixed, flexible, and discretionary.
Okay, I think I can handle that.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like,
Yeah.
fixed expenses are things like your rent or mortgage payments.
Right, those are pretty much set in stone.
Yeah, unless you decide to move.
Yeah,
But then you've got your flexible expenses, things like groceries or utilities.
okay. Those can fluctuate a bit depending on your usage and stuff.
Exactly. And then there are the discretionary expenses, the fun stuff like eating out, entertainment,
The
hobbies.
things that make life worth living.
Totally. But also the things that can easily get out of control if you're not careful.
Yeah, especially if you're relying on credit cards to fund them.
Oof. Don't even get me started on credit card debt.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But before we move on, I did want to mention this one gem from the guide. Pay yourself first.
Ah, yes, the golden rule of personal finance.
It basically means saving at least 5% of your income right off the bat.
Exactly. Treat it like a non-negotiable expense. Pay yourself before you pay anyone else.
Okay, that makes sense in theory, but is that always realistic? Like, what if someone's already living paycheck to paycheck?
That's a great question. And the guide acknowledges that 5% might not be doable for everyone right away, especially if you're just starting out.
So it's more about the principle of saving something, even if it's just a small amount.
Exactly. It's about shifting your mindset from spend what's left to save first, then spend.
Okay, so we've got our income analyzed and our expenses broken down. Now what?
Now we move on to step three, organizing the budget.
Ooh, this is where we whip out the spreadsheets and get all number crunchy, right?
You know it,
Eh.
but the guide keeps it pretty simple, actually. It introduces this concept of the expense to income ratio.
Okay, that sounds a bit intimidating. What is that exactly?
It's basically just a way to see what percentage of your income you're spending.
Ah, so like if I'm spending 80% of what I earn, that's not a good sign, right?
Not ideal, no.
Yeah.
The goal is to keep that ratio under 0.75, meaning you're spending less than 75% of what you bring in.
Okay, so it's like a quick checkup to see if your spending is in a healthy range.
Exactly. And if it's not, well, then it's time to revisit those flexible and discretionary expenses and see where you can make some cuts.
So like maybe skipping that daily latte or packing my lunch a few times a week?
Exactly. Small changes can make a big difference over time.
All right, so we've tackled income expenses and even figured out our expense to income ratio. What's next on our budgeting adventure?
Well, next, we're going to face the monster under the bed. Debt.
Oh no, not the dreaded D word.
I know it's not the most fun topic, but it's important to address.
Eh.
Step 4 in the guide dives into borrowing and credit card debt.
Okay, so like understanding interest rates, minimum payments, and all that scary stuff.
Yep, all the things that can make debt feel overwhelming. But the guide breaks it down in a way that's actually easy to understand.
That's good because I think a lot of people avoid dealing with debt simply because it feels too complicated.
Right, and that's where those worksheets in the guide come in handy. They help you break down your debt and figure out a plan to tackle it.
Like a debt-slaying strategy guide. I like it.
Exactly. And if you're struggling with high-interest credit card debt, the guide suggests looking into consolidation options.
So like maybe transferring your balance to a card with a lower interest rate.
Right, or potentially getting a personal loan to pay off those high-interest cards. It can save you a lot of money in the long run.
It's like swapping out a monster for a slightly less scary monster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You still have to deal with it, but at least it's more manageable.
Okay, so we've analyzed our income, dissected our expenses, and even faced our debt head on. Feels like we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. But the real challenge is still ahead of us.
Oh no, what's next?
Sticking to the budget.
Yeah.
All the planning in the world won't help if you don't actually put those plans into action.
Ooh, that's where things get real, right?
Exactly. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2. We'll dive into the make or break strategies for turning that budget plan into a reality.
And we'll get to see how those example budgets from Carrie and Nathan actually play out.
Yes, it's going to be good. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the make or break part of budgeting, actually sticking to the plan.
The part everyone dreads.
Right. But before we get into that, I'm dying to hear about those example budgets from the guide.
Oh yeah, Carrie, Nathan.
Yeah, like their stories just seem so relatable.
Totally. They really bring those budgeting principles to life.
Okay, so remind me again, Carrie's the one with the bad budget, right?
Yeah, she's a single mom juggling a part-time job, and her initial budget attempt, well, it kind of highlights the importance of being realistic.
Oh no, what did she do?
Well, she overestimated her income, assuming those maximum hours and full child support payments would always come through.
Oof. Yeah, life rarely works out that perfectly.
Right. And the guide really emphasizes the need for a buffer. Like, don't just base your budget on the best case scenario factor in potential fluctuations.
So like what if you get sick or your car breaks down or, life just happens?
Exactly. Think about it. Have you ever experienced those unexpected dips in income? Maybe a client project falls through or you have to take some unpaid time off.
Oh yeah, all the time. That's why I'm a big fan of side hustles. A little extra cushion never hurts.
Speaking of cushions, the guide also talks about building in some wiggle room for your expenses.
Like, don't cut back so much that you're setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. Like, Carrie tried to go for a $0 budget for dining out.
Oh wow, that's ambitious.
It is, but maybe a bit too restrictive. She ended up ordering takeout after a late work night, which totally blew her budget.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen. It's like you're trying to be so good, but then you just crave a burger and fries.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that flexibility is key. Maybe build in a small just-in-case allowance for those unexpected expenses.
So like instead of denying yourself completely, allow for a little indulgence now and then.
Exactly. Deprivation just leads to binging later on.
So true. It's all about finding that balance. But it seems like a lot of Carrie's budget struggles came from not having a clear picture of her spending patterns.
You hit the nail on the head. The guide stresses the importance of tracking your spending for a few months before you even try to set a budget.
Ah, so you know where your money's actually going before you start telling it where to go.
Exactly. That data is gold.
Data is power. Okay, so what about Nathan? He's the one with the good budget, right?
Yes, Nathan is all about being cautious and realistic.
Oh.
He didn't try to cut back to the bone, but he allocated reasonable amounts for everything.
So, like, he wasn't trying to live on rice and beans for a month just to save a few bucks.
Exactly.
Hmm?
He was mindful about his spending, but he also allowed for some fun stuff.
That's the key, right? A budget that's sustainable.
Yes. And I love that he even over-budgeted for his mother-in-law's medical expenses, just in
Well,
case.
that's smart. It's like that saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Exactly. And the best part is, when those expenses were lower than expected, he was able to put that extra money towards paying down debt faster.
A budgeting win-win. Okay, so we've seen the good and the bad. What happens next? Does the guy just leave Carrie hanging with her bad budget?
Not at all. They actually revisit her budget and give it a makeover, showing that even small tweaks can make a huge difference.
Ooh, a budget makeover montage. I love it.
Right. And it's a great takeaway for all of us. You don't need a complete overhaul to improve your financial situation. Small, consistent changes can yield big results over time.
Okay, so spill the tea. What kind of tweaks did they make to Carrie's budget?
Well, first they adjusted her income expectations to be more realistic. They also built in that small buffer between her expected income and planned expenses, creating a cushion for those financial hiccups.
That cushion sounds amazing. No more panicking over every little unexpected expense.
Exactly. And then on the expense side, she made some adjustments, allocating a bit more to groceries and accepting that some dining out might happen.
So basically being more realistic about her needs and habits.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot between discipline and flexibility. The goal is a budget that works for your life, not against it.
Did she magically become debt-free after this budget makeover?
Well, not magically, but even though she went slightly over budget in a couple of categories because she had that buffer built in, she still ended the month with extra money to put towards her credit card debt.
Proof that with a little planning and some realistic adjustments, you can turn even a bad budget into a stepping stone towards financial stability.
Exactly. It's all about progress, not perfection.
Okay, so we've tackled income expenses, debt, and even budget makeovers. What else is there?
Well, now it's time to dive into the world of budgeting technology. The guide covers some pretty amazing tools that can streamline your financial life.
Ooh, I love a good tech deep dive. Let's do it. Okay, so we've analyzed income, dissected expenses, learned from real-life budget wins and fails, but now, let's get real for a sec. The thought of manually tracking all of that, it just makes me want to bury myself in receipts.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming, but that's where technology swoops in to save the day.
The guide talks about that, right? Budgeting made easy.
Yeah, it dives into a whole array of tools, from the super basic to those fancy subscription platforms, something for everyone. Like for those who love spreadsheets.
Although the trusty spreadsheet never fails.
Exactly. You can totally rock your budget with good old Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. They give you that control and flexibility.
They do. But let's be honest, all that manual data entry can be a bit of a time suck.
True. That's where a tool like Tiller Money comes in. It's pretty cool, actually. It links your bank accounts and credit cards directly to a spreadsheet.
So no more manually entering every single transaction.
Exactly. It automates it all. It's like a hybrid, Spreadsheet power with a little less grunt work. Though there is a monthly fee after a free trial.
A trade-off. Less time, a bit of money. I guess it depends on how much you value your time, right? But what if spreadsheets just aren't my thing?
Well, if you're craving a more user-friendly experience, the guide also highlights dedicated budgeting software.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, you need a budget. YNAB for short. People rave about its interface. Super sleek, works across your devices, even tracks goals, and has personalized support.
I've heard of YNAB. It's all about giving every dollar a job, right? Like you assign each dollar to a specific category.
That's it. So if you're super organized and want to be intentional with your spending, YNAB's your jam. Now, if you're more into simplicity and just want things to be easy,
Easy is always good.
right, then Mint might be more your speed. It's a free app, actually, owned by Intuit. It's great for tracking, categorizing, and even keeping tabs on your credit score.
Mint. Yeah, I've seen ads for that one. Free's always a bonus.
Totally. So yeah, it's like a buffet of budgeting tech out there. The key, though, find the tool that really clicks with your needs and your tech comfort level. The guide does a great job, though, of breaking down all the features, the pricing, helps you compare.
That's helpful. I'm all about finding something I'll actually use, not just something that sounds fancy.
Exactly. The best tool is the one you actually stick with. Right.
So true. Well, I'd say we've journeyed pretty far in our Budgeting Made Easy deep dive. We've explored analyzing income, expenses, learned from real-life budgets, even delved into tech.
It's been a journey. But remember, budgeting, it's not about deprivation. It's about giving you the power to make choices with your money. Like when you've mastered your finances, that's freedom.
It's like that saying, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you. It's about getting your spending in line with what matters most to you, right?
Absolutely. And this guide, it gives you the tools to do just that.
I feel inspired to give my own budget a fresh look, actually. Thanks for breaking all of this down with me.
Anytime. And remember, those small steps, they can lead to some pretty big changes.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into budgeting made easy. If you enjoyed this journey, I'd highly recommend checking out the guide for yourself. It's full of even more tips, worksheets, real-life stories to help you take the reins of your finances and achieve those goals. Thanks for joining us.